Welcome back. Tonight's story comes from deep within a jungle hunters once feared entering after sunset. For generations, old hunters and spiritual healers warned people about a place called the Black Mountain, a massive wilderness where strange disappearances, unexplained deaths, and terrifying encounters were whispered about for decades. The elders used to say there were things living in those forests that were neither human nor animal, things that could imitate human voices, wear human faces, and lure lonely travelers closer before revealing what they truly were. Many of the stories spoke of beautiful women appearing deep in impossible places, far from roads, villages, or civilization. Women who arrived without footprints, without fear, without explanation, and according to the legends, those who followed them into the darkness were never seen again. Tonight's story is inspired by supernatural folklore, jungle legends, and stories shared by hunters who believed certain ancient creatures still roam remote forests even today. For dramatic storytelling purposes, the names used in this story have been changed. They do not represent the real hunters involved in the original encounter. So tonight, if you ever find yourself deep in the wilderness, and someone appears where no human should be careful who you invite to your fire, because sometimes, evil does not arrive looking like a monster. Sometimes, it arrives smiling. Tonight's story is called The Woman Who Came from the Dark Wood. I grew up hearing stories from my grandfather about the jungle. He always told me to hunt in pairs, and if I ever traveled with a group, always travel in even numbers. Back then, I never understood why. I thought it was just another old hunting superstition. But my grandfather was not the type of man who spoke without reason. He was an old hunter, a man who survived war, wild animals, and things he refused to fully explain. He spent most of his life deep in the wilderness, and over the years, he taught me everything he knew about surviving in the jungle. How to track animals, how to read broken branches and footprints, how to tell when something in the forest was wrong, and sometimes, how to survive things that were not supposed to exist. One thing my grandfather always warned me about was this: in the jungle, do not speak foolishly. Back then, I laughed every time he said it, but he would become serious immediately. Then he would tell me something that still stays with me today. Evil spirits hear everything. They take foolish words as a challenge. He believed there were things in the wilderness that listened to people, things that waited in darkness for arrogant men to mock them. And according to him, the jungle did not belong entirely to humans. Whenever we sat around the fire at night, he would warn me about places deep in the jungle where the spirit world touched our own. According to him, the most dangerous spirits were the ones that looked human, especially women. As a young man, I laughed at those stories, until the night I saw one myself. This happened years after I returned home from military service. Back then, hunting was one of the only things that brought peace to my mind. The silence of the wilderness helped me forget the things I saw during war. So when 5 of my friends invited me on a hunting trip deep into the mountains, I agreed immediately. There were 6 of us total. B, Mua, 2, Hua, Jang, and me. Again, for dramatic storytelling purposes only, these are not the real names of the hunters involved in this encounter. All of us were experienced hunters. Most were former soldiers or men raised hunting deep in the wilderness since childhood. We carried rifles, machetes, hunting knives, food supplies, and enough gear to survive several days deep in the jungle. Our destination was a place locals feared, the Black Mountain. Even hearing the name made older villagers uncomfortable. Some refused to even mention it after sunset. According to local stories, entire hunting groups vanished there over the years. But we laughed at those stories. We thought we were prepared for anything. We were wrong. The deeper we traveled into the jungle, the stranger things became. At first, everything felt normal. Birds calling overhead, insects buzzing, wind moving through the trees. But by the second day, the sounds slowly disappeared. And by the third night, the silence became unbearable. No insects, no frogs, no birds, nothing. Just endless darkness between the trees. Even the air itself felt heavy, like the jungle was watching us. We finally spoke while we prepared camp. "I don't like this place." Mua laughed nervously. "What? The ghost story's finally getting to you." But B did not smile. He kept staring into the trees. "My grandfather warned me about this forest." That sentence made everyone quiet for a moment. Because where we came from, when older hunters warned you about a place, you listened. Still, we stayed. We built a fire inside a small clearing surrounded by massive black trees. Fog rolled through the jungle shortly after sunset. Thick, cold, heavy enough that we could barely see beyond the firelight. Jang quietly muttered something under his breath while loading ammunition into his rifle. "What if the old stories are real?" Tu laughed loudly. "If spirits exist, they better be afraid of bullets." The moment Tu said that, a cold feeling ran through my chest. I immediately remembered my grandfather's warning. In the jungle, do not speak foolishly. Evil spirits take it as a challenge. I looked toward Tu and forced a nervous laugh with the others. But deep inside, something already felt wrong. Hours passed around the campfire. We cooked meat, shared alcohol, told old military stories. Slowly, the tension faded. Then sometime after midnight, we heard footsteps, soft footsteps, slow footsteps, coming from somewhere beyond the trees. Every man around the fire immediately went silent. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The footsteps stopped just beyond the fog. Then suddenly, she appeared. A young woman stepped into the firelight. Beautiful, too beautiful. Long black hair, pale skin, an old black dress slightly wet from rain. But strangely, there was no mud on her feet, no cuts, no fear in her eyes. Nothing, just a calm smile. Hua immediately stood up. "Miss, are you okay?" The young woman nodded softly. "I got lost." Her voice sounded strangely calming, almost hypnotic. Mua quickly asked where she came from. She pointed vaguely into the darkness. "My family's farm is down near the road." The moment she said that, a cold feeling ran through my body, because there were no roads anywhere near us. We had spent 3 full days hiking into those mountains. No normal person could accidentally wander into that jungle at midnight, especially not alone. But the others either ignored that fact or were too distracted by her beauty to care. B offered her food. Tu handed her a blanket. Jing moved closer beside her, smiling nervously. The woman smiled at all of them. But I noticed something immediately. She never blinked. Not once. And her eyes reflected the fire strangely, like animal eyes staring from darkness. I quietly stayed away from the group. My grandfather's warnings echoed inside my head. If you ever see a woman deep in the jungle at night, run. The woman sat beside the hunters while they laughed around the fire. At first she barely spoke. Mostly she listened, smiled immediately, touched their arms softly when they joked. The men became strangely relaxed around her. Too relaxed, almost like they were forgetting where they were. Then I noticed another strange thing. She never ate. He handed her cooked meat. She only held it, never taking a bite. Mua offered alcohol. She pretended to drink, but I never saw her swallow anything. Then the smell started. Rotten meat. Very faint at first, but growing stronger every minute. I quietly looked around camp thinking maybe an animal carcass was nearby. But the smell always became stronger whenever the woman moved closer to the men. My chest tightened. Something was horribly wrong. Then I saw it. At first, my mind refused to understand what I was looking at. Jing sat beside the woman laughing loudly. But beneath the blanket covering her legs, something moved. Something long and black slowly slid outward from beneath the fabric. It looked like an arm, but impossibly thin. Too long, like the leg of a giant insect. I froze. The thing slowly pressed against Jing's stomach beneath his jacket. Jing kept talking, still smiling, still drinking, like he could not feel it. Then slowly, the black arm pushed directly into his stomach. No scream, no reaction, nothing. Jing kept laughing while the thing disappeared inside his body. Then, the woman slowly pulled something wet from beneath the blanket. Intestines. God. She was eating him while he was still alive. And somehow, none of the others noticed. The woman slowly lifted her eyes toward me and smiled. But that smile was no longer human. The corners of her mouth stretched too far across her face, slowly tearing upward, like skin being pulled apart from underneath. My entire body locked in place. I could not breathe. Then she whispered softly, "You can see me." The moment she spoke those words, every sound in the jungle disappeared. No wind, no insects, no movement, nothing, just silence. A dead silence, so unnatural. It felt like the entire forest was holding its breath. That was when my grandfather's teachings came rushing back into my mind. He once told me there were things deep in the wilderness that could cloud the human mind before feeding. Creatures that could make people see what they wanted to see. Spirits that wore beauty like a disguise. And according to him, fire was one of the few things they feared. Without hesitation, I grabbed my hunting knife and shoved the blade deep into the campfire. The steel slowly turned dark orange, then bright red. The woman's smile disappeared instantly. For the first time since she appeared, she looked afraid. Then Jing suddenly looked down. His smile vanished. Confusion spread across his face as blood slowly poured down the front of his jacket. And then he screamed. A scream so loud and terrified, it echoed through the entire jungle. Everything exploded into chaos. The woman rose slowly to her feet, but she was no longer human. At first, we heard the cracking, soft popping sounds deep inside her body. Then louder, bones twisting, joints snapping. The sound echoed through the trees like branches breaking during a storm. Suddenly, the air changed. A violent gust of wind slammed into the camp from every direction at once. The campfire bent sideways. Ash exploded into the air. Leaves and dirt spiraled violently around us. The trees above groaned and swayed as if a massive storm had appeared directly overhead. But when I looked up, the sky was completely clear. No clouds, no thunder, no rain. Nothing. Yet the wind kept growing stronger. The fog whipped violently between the trees while the temperature dropped so fast I could see my own breath. Every instinct inside me screamed to run. Then the woman's body began twisting. Her arms stretched longer and longer until her clawed fingers nearly touched the ground. Her spine cracked loudly while her legs bent backward like an animal. The skin along her face split apart with wet tearing sounds. Then her jaw slowly opened wider and wider until it stretched almost completely across her head. Rows of long needle-like teeth unfolded from inside her mouth. But the worst part was what finally crawled out from beneath the human skin. The creature resembled a massive standing dog-like beast, tall enough to tower over a grown man. Its body was thin but muscular, covered in dark gray flesh stretched tightly across its bones. Its arms hung unnaturally long with clawed hands dragging against the dirt. Its legs bent backward like a starving animal. And across the center of its chest, was a large patch of orangish-colored fur stained dark with blood. The patch almost looked burned beneath the firelight. Its black eyes reflected the flames like an animal staring from deep underground. And every time it breathed, thick saliva mixed with black blood dripped from its mouth onto the ground below. The creature slowly tilted its head toward us, studying us, almost curiously. Then, it opened its mouth wider, far wider than any living thing should, and it screamed. The sound, God, the sound did not belong in this world. It sounded exactly like a wild hog caught in a snare trap. A horrifying mixture of squealing, choking, screaming, and dying. Ree-ha! The noise exploded through the jungle like thunder. The sound shook through my chest. It sounded angry, hungry, in pain, and somehow, almost human at the same time. The creature continued screaming while saliva and black blood poured from its mouth. The violent wind around us became even stronger. The campfire nearly went out completely. He covered his ears while stumbling backward in terror. Mua nearly dropped his rifle. Hua whispered prayers under his breath while staring frozen at the creature. Then somewhere deep within the jungle, something answered back. Another scream, far away through the darkness. Then another, and another. Different directions, all around us. The moment we heard those distant cries, every hunter around that fire realized the same horrifying truth. That thing was not alone. He grabbed his rifle first and fired. The gunshot exploded through the jungle, but the creature moved impossibly fast. 1 second it stood beside the fire. The next, it slammed me against a tree with enough force to crack the trunk behind him. I heard his neck snap instantly. Mua screamed and fired wildly into the darkness. The creature vanished into the fog. Then suddenly, it reappeared beside Hoa. Its claws sliced across his throat so fast I barely saw it happen. Blood sprayed across the fire. Hoa collapsed, choking on his own blood while trying to scream. Two turned and ran toward the trees. But the creature chased him on all fours like some starving animal. We heard him screaming deep in the darkness. Then came the sound of bones snapping. Then silence. Absolute silence. The jungle became madness. Gunshots. Screams. Wind roaring through the trees. Something massive moving through the darkness around us. I pulled the burning knife from the fire. The blade glowed bright orange. The creature suddenly froze when it saw it. For the first time, it looked afraid. The creature slowly circled around me on all fours. Its black eyes locked onto the burning blade. Then it spoke again using the young woman's voice. You carry old teachings. My hands shook violently while gripping the knife. I remembered every lesson my grandfather taught me as a child. The prayers, the warnings, the rituals involving fire and iron. Back then, I thought he was only trying to scare me. Now those teachings were the only reason I was still alive. Then the creature lunged, fast enough to blur through the darkness. I waited until the very last second. Then I drove the glowing knife directly into its chest. The scream it released still haunts me today. It sounded like dozens of people screaming together. Men, women, children, all crying in pain at once. The creature clawed wildly at me while black blood poured from the wound. Its skin began smoking instantly, burning, melting. The smell was unbearable, like rotten flesh mixed with burned hair. I pushed the knife deeper. The glowing blade pierced through its back. Then suddenly, everything stopped. The creature froze completely. Its body slowly collapsed inward like burned paper. The beautiful woman disappeared completely, leaving behind only a black skeletal figure beside the fire. Then even that crumbled into ash. By sunrise, only 2 of us remained alive. Mua survived with deep wounds across his chest. I survived because I remembered my grandfather's teachings. B. 2. Hua and Zhang never made it out of the Black Mountain. At first, we searched for them ourselves. But deep inside, we already knew something was wrong. The jungle felt different after sunrise. Too quiet. Too still. Like the mountain itself was watching us leave. Every few minutes, we thought we heard movement somewhere deep in the trees. Sometimes it sounded like footsteps. Sometimes distant crying. And once, I swear we heard that same hog-like scream echo far away through the fog. Mua looked at me immediately when we heard it. Neither of us said a word. We just kept walking, and we did not stop until we finally reached the village. When we returned home, the elders immediately knew something terrible had happened. People gathered around us while Mua and I tried explaining what we saw. At first, some of the younger men did not believe us. But the elders did, especially when they heard where we had gone. The Black Mountain. The oldest men in the village became completely silent after hearing that name. One elder slowly shook his head before speaking. You should never have camped there after dark. Another elder asked me quietly, did it look human at first? When I answered yes, several of them refused to speak any further. That was when I realized they already knew stories about creatures like this, maybe even encounters of their own. The following morning, a group of elders and hunters returned to the mountain with us. Some carried rifles. Others carried old spiritual items, protective charms, burned herbs, ancient blades passed down through generations. None of them spoke much during the hike. Even the older hunters looked nervous. When we finally reached our old campsite, everything was gone. No bodies, no blood, no ashes, nothing. It was as if the mountain itself had swallowed every trace of what happened that night. The campfire pit remained untouched, but the ground around it looked wrong. The dirt was covered in strange, animal-like tracks. Long, thin, almost human, but not completely. One elder knelt beside the tracks quietly, then stood up immediately. We leave now. Nobody argued. Not a single person. We searched for hours deeper into the jungle, calling the names of B, 2, Hua, and Zhang, but the mountain never answered us back. No bodies were ever found. No bones. No clothing. Nothing. And even today, their families still do not truly know what happened to them inside that mountain. Several days later, I visited my grandfather. The moment he saw my face, he already knew something terrible had happened. I told him everything. The woman, the feeding, the creature, the screams in the jungle, the fire, the missing hunters, and how even the elders could not find them. He listened quietly without interrupting me once. Then after a very long silence, he finally spoke. You were lucky you remembered the fire. I asked him what that creature truly was. My grandfather stared toward the dark forest outside his house for a long time before answering. Then he said something that still haunts me to this very day. Some spirits wander in darkness so long, they forget they were ever human. Then he said something that still haunts me to this very day. Then he looked directly at me. And some are still out there. Thank you for listening to tonight's story. If you enjoyed this terrifying tale inspired by jungle folklore, supernatural encounters, and dark legends, please like, subscribe, and join us again here at Dark Tale Shorts 101. And remember, if you ever hear footsteps deep in the jungle at night, and a beautiful stranger appears where no human should be, do not let beauty blind your instincts, because sometimes the deadliest predators were a human smile. Good night.